If your child suddenly developed a high fever tonight, you would probably reach for a phone, call a doctor, or drive to the nearest hospital. But imagine living 30,000 years ago. There are no hospitals, no medicine, no understanding of bacteria or viruses. Your child is shivering beside a fire, breathing heavily, growing weaker with every passing hour. Outside, the darkness of the Ice Age stretches across the landscape, and somewhere beyond the camp, predators roam through the night. What would a parent do? Would they simply accept that death was inevitable, or did ancient humans have their own ways of caring for the sick? For a long time, many people imagined prehistoric life as brutally simple, a world where only the strongest survived and the weak were left behind. Yet modern archaeology is revealing a far more surprising story. Hidden within ancient skeletons, cave sites, and traces of prehistoric medicine lies evidence that our ancestors may have cared for sick children with a level of compassion and ingenuity that few would expect. To understand this story, we must travel back tens of thousands of years to a small hunter-gatherer camp at the edge of the last ice age. As dawn breaks over the frozen plains, smoke rises from a cluster of shelters made from animal hides and wooden poles. Families gather around fires while hunters prepare for another dangerous day. Children play nearby, learning the skills they will need to survive. But not every child is healthy. Illness was one of the greatest threats in prehistoric life. A simple infection, a contaminated wound, or a severe fever could become life-threatening within days. Unlike modern parents, ancient mothers and fathers could not rely on science or professional medicine. Yet archaeological discoveries suggest they were far from helpless. One of the most remarkable clues comes from prehistoric skeletons belonging to children who suffered serious illnesses or developmental conditions, yet survived for years afterward. These remains indicate that someone provided food, protection, and care during periods when those children could not fully care for themselves. Such evidence challenges the old stereotype of prehistoric humans as emotionless survivors. Instead, it points towards strong family bonds and communities willing to invest time and resources in vulnerable children. Anthropologist Pat Shipman has argued that cooperation and caregiving were among the defining strengths of our species, helping Homo sapiens survive challenges that might have destroyed less social groups. But how exactly did ancient people respond when a child became sick? The answer may lie in one of humanity's oldest forms of medicine. Archaeologists have discovered evidence that prehistoric groups possessed detailed knowledge of plants long before the invention of agriculture. Certain medicinal herbs found at ancient sites appear to have been selected for their healing properties rather than their nutritional value. Even more intriguing, some researchers believe this knowledge was passed down through generations, creating an early form of traditional medicine. While these people had no concept of germs, they may have learned through observation which plants eased pain, reduced inflammation, or helped recovery. This raises an extraordinary possibility. Could Stone Age parents have acted as the world's first caregivers, experimenting, learning, and preserving medical knowledge thousands of years before written history began? Researchers such as Stephen Mithen have suggested that the growing complexity of human culture depended heavily on the transfer of knowledge between generations, and few forms of knowledge would have been more valuable than understanding how to keep children alive. Yet despite these efforts, prehistoric parents still faced dangers that modern families can barely imagine. Disease, injury, malnutrition, and harsh climates remained constant threats. And this leads to an even deeper question. When a child became seriously ill in a world without medicine, what treatments did ancient people actually use, and how many of those practices might still surprise us today? To answer that, we must step inside the daily lives of prehistoric families and witness how they confronted one of the most frightening experiences any parent can face: the sickness of a child. Tip tuk theo dunghung 1011 ki tu torng bai. Zurde la part 2 ver do jai huang 3.54 ki tu. Viet thine mut duan lien mike duinyut. Ka 2 discovery moments va ket thuk bang ko zund, sang part 3. Imagine a child in a Stone Age camp, waking with a fever. The hunters are preparing to leave, but the usual energy of the morning feels different. The child refuses food, curls up beside the fire, and shivers despite the warmth. For a parent living 30,000 years ago, this would have been one of the most terrifying moments imaginable. They could not measure temperature, diagnose infections, or understand the invisible organisms causing disease. Yet evidence suggests they did not simply sit and wait. Across prehistoric societies, caring for sick children may have been a daily reality, one that shaped family life far more than we often realize. Archaeologists and anthropologists increasingly believe that ancient parents relied on generations of accumulated knowledge to respond when illness struck. Through observation and experience, they learned which plants soothed pain, which leaves could be applied to wounds, and which natural remedies seemed to improve a child's chances of recovery. One remarkable discovery moment comes from archaeological evidence showing that medicinal plant use may be far older than once believed. Researchers have found traces suggesting that even prehistoric humans selected certain plants for reasons beyond nutrition. Some contained compounds known today to reduce inflammation or relieve discomfort. While Stone Age people had no knowledge of chemistry, they may have recognized patterns over generations. If a particular herb helped a child survive, that knowledge would have been remembered and passed on. In many ways, these parents may have been conducting the earliest form of medicine through trial, observation, and memory. But treatment involved more than plants. A sick child often required constant care. Someone had to stay behind instead of gathering food. Someone had to provide water, warmth, and protection. This was not a small sacrifice in a world where survival depended on daily effort. Every hour spent caring for a vulnerable child was an investment by the entire community. And yet, archaeological discoveries suggest that such investments were made repeatedly. Some child skeletons reveal evidence of illnesses or developmental conditions that would have required long-term support. The fact that these children survived for years indicates that families and communities chose to help rather than abandon them. This challenges one of the oldest myths about prehistoric life. The Stone Age was not simply a brutal competition where only the strongest survived. It was also a world where cooperation increased everyone's chances of survival. Around the evening fire, knowledge about illness may have been shared, much like stories about hunting or migration routes. Older women and experienced caregivers likely became valuable sources of practical wisdom. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have observed that knowledge about healing is often concentrated among elders who spend decades learning from experience. This may have been true tens of thousands of years ago as well. Then comes another surprising discovery moment. Archaeologists have found evidence that prehistoric humans sometimes survived severe injuries and illnesses that should have been fatal without assistance. At several ancient sites, individuals with serious disabilities lived for many years after their conditions developed. While these discoveries often involve adults, they reveal something important about prehistoric culture. People were willing to care for those who could not fully care for themselves. If communities supported injured adults, it becomes easier to imagine the extraordinary efforts made to save a sick child. In fact, a child's survival may have represented the future of the group itself. Every child carried the possibility of becoming a hunter, a gatherer, a parent, or a keeper of knowledge. Protecting them was not simply an act of compassion. It was an investment in the survival of the next generation. Yet, despite all this care, many illnesses remained mysterious and deadly. Some children recovered unexpectedly. Others grew weaker despite every effort their families could make. For prehistoric parents, there was often no way to know which outcome awaited them. And this uncertainty created one of the deepest fears in the ancient world. What happened when illness could not be stopped? What did parents do when all their knowledge, experience, and care were no longer enough? To understand that heartbreaking reality, we must explore the greatest dangers facing Stone Age children and the difficult choices their families were forced to make. For Stone Age parents, the most frightening part of a child's illness was not the fever itself. It was the uncertainty. A child who seemed slightly better in the morning could be fighting for life by nightfall. There were no doctors to explain what was happening and no treatments guaranteed to work. Every illness was a mystery. Some children recovered unexpectedly, while others slipped away despite every effort their families could make. Archaeological and anthropological evidence suggests that childhood was one of the most dangerous stages of life in prehistoric societies. Disease, infection, malnutrition, accidents, and harsh environmental conditions claimed countless young lives long before adulthood. This is one of the main reasons average life expectancy in the Stone Age appears so low. Many children simply never had the chance to grow up. Yet what is remarkable is not how many died, but how much effort ancient people invested in helping them survive. Across thousands of years of prehistory, parents faced challenges that would be almost unimaginable today. During harsh winters, food supplies could become dangerously limited. A sick child often required extra care at precisely the moment resources were most scarce. Communities were forced to make difficult choices, balancing the immediate needs of survival with the hope of saving the next generation. Archaeologist Brian Fagan has often highlighted how environmental instability shaped human history, and nowhere was that pressure felt more intensely than within families trying to protect vulnerable children. Some illnesses may have been linked to contaminated food or water. Others may have spread through close social contact. Without scientific knowledge, prehistoric people could not understand the causes, but they were keen observers. Over countless generations, they learned patterns, recognized symptoms, and developed traditions aimed at increasing survival. Not every practice would have worked, but some undoubtedly provided real benefits. The story of prehistoric childcare is therefore not one of ignorance. It is a story of adaptation. Human beings constantly learning from experience and passing those lessons forward. This ability to accumulate knowledge may have become one of our species' greatest evolutionary advantages. Researchers such as Stephen Mithin and Chris Stringer have argued that the transmission of knowledge across generations played a critical role in human success. Every lesson learned by one generation could help protect the next. Every child who survived carried that knowledge into the future. In this way, caring for sick children was about more than compassion. It was about preserving the community itself. Looking back, it is easy to focus on the hardships of Stone Age life. The cold, the hunger, the disease, the constant uncertainty. Yet archaeology reveals another side of the story. It shows parents staying beside sick children through long nights, families sharing resources with vulnerable members, communities investing precious time and energy into those who could offer little in return. These behaviors reveal something deeply human. Long before cities, agriculture, or civilization, people were already demonstrating empathy, cooperation, and sacrifice. The truth is that ancient parents faced the same fear that parents face today. The fear of losing a child. The tools were different, the world was harsher, and the odds were often worse, but the emotional bond was likely just as powerful. And perhaps that is the most surprising discovery of all. When we look at prehistoric families, we do not see creatures fundamentally different from ourselves. We see mothers and fathers trying to protect the people they loved in the best ways they knew how. Their struggle helped shape the survival of our species and ensured that future generations would inherit both knowledge and care. So, the next time you imagine life in the Stone Age, consider this question. If you were a parent living 30,000 years ago with no medicine, no hospitals, and only the knowledge of your community, what would you be willing to do to save your child's life?